Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this edition of Sin Beyond and Through with Monty. I'm going to roll some pictures along here, and I want you to take a look at them, and I want you to tell me, what do these people have in common? And the first person we're going to see is Telvin Osborne. Now, we heard the news about Telvin Osborne, right? The next person who we're going to see is going to be a female. And this female, a couple of years ago, Lauren Smith Fields. Remember the story about Lauren? Pretty girl there. The next person we're going to see is Christian Toby Umbaselli. Remember him. And next one we're going to see is Jonathan Price. Jonathan Price was in Texas. The next person we're going to see right here is Stephon Clark. Stephon Clark there with his family. And I want you to tell me, what do they have in common? And the next person who we're going to see here is Tyre Nichols. Now, you've seen all these people right here. Can you tell me, what do they have in common? We've seen all of them. And you can say that, yes, they are black. All of them are black. You would be correct with that. You can say that all of them are fairly young. You will be correct with that as well. But there's one other common denominator that ties them all together. Can you tell me what that common denominator is? I'll give you a few seconds. The common denominator is two things. One is that, unfortunately, they all were murdered. And unfortunately, too, all of them except one was murdered by someone who they admire, people who they put on a pedestal, people who they idolized. And those people would be white people. Now, in the case of Tyre Nichols here, he happened to meet his demise at the hands of 5 black officers. And this is Tyre Nichols right here having a Kunta Kinte moment with the child rising up in the air, or you could say rising up to the gods. But Tyre is praising his son right here because he's very grateful, he's gleeful, and he's happy because his child came out looking so white. And this is what I want to talk about with what these people here have in common. All of these people who I pointed out right here, the Tyre Nichols right there, the Stephon Clarks right there. Here we have Jonathan Price. Jonathan Price again, Toby Umbaselli. And we have Lauren Smith Fields. And we have the newest version to add to this list, Telvin Osborne. Now, these people have one other thing in common. And the other thing in which they have in common is that they sent out tweets, they sent out messages, notes to the universe, disrespecting black people. In the case of this character right here, Telvin Osborne, he just couldn't stand black women. The tweets were so awful. I'm not even going to post the tweets here. You guys can look them up. I'm just not going to send that information out there. And one of them stated that he would rather lay down with the dog first before he lies down with the black woman. And the dog had to be white. That just shows you where his mind is at. Lauren Smith Fields right here made a statement about, I tried you Negroes, I gave you my best shot, but something to the effect of like, you disappointed me. She sent that tweet out there and other disparaging tweets about black men. And she met her demise at the hand of a white man. Toby Amosinli had terrible tweets about black women in his class, how he just disdained them, didn't like them, but he met his demise by a white female. He met his demise by someone who he puts on a pedestal, who many black men will make the mistake of saying that I want peace. I need to find peace. And what they're trying to say is that they're trying to find peace away from a black female. Well, she gave you rest in peace. You got that all right. You got what you wanted. And then we have this guy right here, Jonathan Price, who stated that he's addicted to white women. He was against Black Lives Matter, the whole movement. And he met his demise by an officer who he tried to shake hands with, a white officer, by the way. The officer refused to shake his hand. Jonathan felt rejected, turned away. Officer told him to get back here. That's how the whole thing went down. And Jonathan ended up getting some lead put into him by the very man or the people who he admired. And we know what Stephon Clark, his tweets were about. The same black woman charge hating tweets about the only black thing he wanted was the Xbox. He didn't want his children to come out black because he's black enough. Just terrible, disparaging things that you would think that have their partners even looked into who these men were, who you even lying down with. Why would you want to lie down and have children with someone who's just so hateful, full of self-hate towards people who look like his mother? You really do have to wonder about that. Do these women even care? Some cases, unfortunately, I'm probably going to say no because they think that it doesn't apply to them. And we know that I mentioned to you about Tyre Nichols. People say that his tweets were like 10 years before his passing. But I want to explain to you about that 10-year thing. But he was questioning about black women when they fight. Why do their hair come off? Because of the weave or the wigs that he was saying. And how he was praising his son, because he felt that his son looked just so white. But people, I'm going to take you down a different path here. Now we're going to change gears. And when I change gears right here, I do not need for you guys to accuse me of being into any type of thing that's anti-Christian, any type of demonic worship or anything like that, because I'm not into that. But it is going to get a little deep right here. And if you're scared, I suggest maybe you should go to church. But I want to touch on what I felt a while ago, what these people were doing, what these people were saying, and the consequences that came with what they chose to put out there in the universe. Because they did something that was extremely dangerous that I wouldn't dare do. They did something that was very risky that you have to be aware of. Keep one thing in mind is that we're not just fighting against flesh and blood. We're fighting against principalities in high places. And in many cases, ancestors. There are ancestors who are connected to us that we have to be very careful not to offend. What many of these people did with their tweets, unbeknown to them, is that they offended the ancestors. You have to be very careful with what you put out there because ancestral connection is very real. And you cannot be going around saying derogatory things about black people and think that there are no consequences. All of these people right here, all 5 of them, actually 6 on here, 6 of them put out negative tweets, negative energy, and it almost like boomerang back. But what I believe happened to them is that they cut a cord to their ancestral protection. And what they did was that having that cord cut is that they allowed themselves not to be protected by the ancestors. So that negative energy that they put out there, it came back to them and the very same people, most of them, with the exception of Tyre Nichols, it came back to the very people who they idolized, who they placed on a pedestal, who they thought were the better people or the better folks. And this is the reason why I am very careful not to disparage black people. I can call you out. I'm very much pro-black. I have no problem calling out black women, black men. But see, you have to be just in doing that. It has to be a reason. It cannot be no hidden agenda behind it. It cannot be fueled with hatred, animosity towards your own race. It cannot be fueled with prejudice. It cannot be fueled with anything like that. That's very negative. It has to be something behind it that's positive, that you are trying to turn people around or trying to teach them a lesson. We talk about here, pay tribute to their ancestors, but what many of these people did in these negative tweets is that's a form of blasphemy. They pretty much cursed their ancestors and in turn allow themselves to be cursed, because you cannot put things out there like that and think that there's going to be no consequences. Doing that, as proven right here, is extremely dangerous. You put yourself at risk, you put your children at risk, you put your family at risk. Many of these people are gone right now. Now they have a broken family because they couldn't get over their self-hatred, their disdain for their own race, their dislike for themselves. They ended up putting themselves into a position where they'll probably have to, who knows, come back here and repeat it over again, because they didn't get it right. Our Christians may have a different thought where they would go. I'm not going to go there and say that. But many of them now are begging for, like, when they passed away, a GoFundMe page. Well, let me just tell you one thing. If you put out that type of hate among your own race of people, and many of these people may say that these men right here who put this out there, they're anti-black women and not anti-black male. I disagree with that. As I've always stated before, you cannot be anti-black female and not be anti-black male. You cannot be anti-black male and not be anti-black female. Half and half. We both come from each other. I mean, a female did not create a female. A male did not create, two males did not create a male or a female, a baby. You get what I'm trying to say? So therefore, if you hate one, you definitely hate the other. It's almost like saying, if someone were to be against your mother or talk disparagingly about your mother, will you still accept them? Or want them as a friend or want them around? We know the answer is going to be no. If someone said that about your father, if you said that about your father, to some degree, they're attacking you because you come from your father and your mother. So this rhetoric that these people put out there, disparaging things, not understanding that there is an ancestral tie and connection and the dire consequences that it can bring. They didn't really understand that. Had they would have known deeper, maybe they would have thought not to do something like that. And maybe that people need to think that you're not just talking about people on earth today when you do that. There's a whole lineage of people that you're talking about. There's a whole lineage of people who you are disparaging. They may not be here. Some are here. And some have left this particular plane. But you're still disparaging them. And ancestral disparagement is extremely dangerous. It can have dire consequences. You open yourself up to not being protected by your ancestors, is what you're doing. And you have your ancestors pretty much, I want to say turning over in their grave, but probably not doing that, but definitely probably disappointed in what you're doing and very much disappointed in what you are doing to the youth today. God forbid if someone who is younger, who don't really have a strong sense of identity about themselves, hear this rhetoric that you are choosing to put out there because out of self-hate, out of self-dislike, out of your own ignorance, which is no excuse, by the way. Who really knows how that would affect them? So people, move cautiously. Do not allow yourself to be taken with self-hate because of what this world says about black people. We know the information out there is negative, it's derogatory, that they choose to put out there, but you have to look past that and through that. And when you have a bad experience with a few people, do not blame the whole race for that. That's white supremacist thinking. That's clan thinking, where they put everyone in the same barrel or the same box. Learn to separate people. People are individuals, and do not hold everyone accountable for what some are doing to you. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that is another edition of Sin Beyond and Through with Monty, and I will see you all beyond and through.
So I reamp myself to spit something that counts. Sit back and laugh to what it amounts.